Ladies and gentlemen, I like to start with something funny. I heard about this man who was training for a marathon. He had never run more than a mile in his life, but he signed up anyway. People told him, "You're too out of shape. You'll never make it. You're wasting your time." But he had a different mindset. Every day, he laced up his sneakers, ran a little further, pushed a little harder. Race day came, and sure enough, he crossed that finish line. Not first, not even close, but smiling from ear to ear because he finished against all odds. That's the kind of spirit I want to talk to you about today, against all odds. You may be facing situations right now where it looks like there's no way through. Doors have closed. The medical report is bad. The finances aren't adding up. People are telling you it's not going to happen. But here's the good news. God is not limited by the odds. He's not intimidated by how big the challenge is. He doesn't check the statistics before he blesses you. When you stay in faith, when you keep believing, keep doing the right thing, God will take you places you couldn't go on your own. It may not have happened yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The odds may be against you, but the Most High God is for you, and that's all that matters. There will be times in life when believing is not easy. It's one thing to believe when everything is lining up, when you see the progress, when doors are opening, but it's a completely different story when you believe and nothing is happening. When the odds are against you, when people are walking away, when it feels like the more you pray, the worse things get. That's when your faith really matters. Believing when it doesn't make sense is what separates those who live an average life from those who live an extraordinary one. It's easy to believe when all the signs are confirming it. But real faith is believing when there's no evidence, no encouragement, no reason in the natural to keep hoping. It's trusting that even though you can't see it, even though you can't feel it, God is still working behind the scenes. Sometimes the greatest tests of our faith are not in the battles we fight openly, but in the battles we fight quietly. In the private moments when nobody sees the tears, when nobody knows the struggles, and you have every reason to quit, yet you choose to believe anyway. You choose to wake up with expectancy. You choose to speak victory over your life when nothing looks victorious. Maybe today you're in a situation that makes no sense. You were kind, but they still betrayed you. You worked hard, but the business still slowed down. You prayed and stood in faith, but the healing hasn't come. It's tempting to get discouraged and think, what's the use? It's never going to happen for me. But I'm here to tell you, keep believing. Faith is powerful when it's not propped up by what you see, but fueled by what you know. That God is faithful, that His promises are true, that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. When Abraham was told he would be the father of many nations, he was almost 100 years old, and his wife Sarah was barren. Every fact in the natural said it was impossible. There was nothing logical about it. Yet the scripture says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He didn't believe because it made sense. He believed because he trusted the one who made the promise. He knew that the same God who created the universe, who set the stars in the sky, could bring life where there was no life. Sometimes believing when it doesn't make sense is exactly the ingredient God uses to perform the miracle. Your faith against all odds becomes the very thing that unlocks His favor. God is not moved by the odds. He's moved by your faith. You might have people telling you, there's no way you're going to beat that illness. There's no way you're going to get out of debt. No way you'll ever accomplish that dream. You need to let those voices go in one ear and out the other. Their opinion doesn't determine your destiny. The odds don't set the limits for your life. God does. And if He said it, it will come to pass. Believing when it doesn't make sense doesn't mean you won't have doubts or questions or moments where you feel like giving up. That's normal. Faith isn't about never feeling weak. It's about choosing to stand even when you feel weak. It's about saying, God, I don't understand it. I don't see how it's going to work out, but I trust you. I believe you are bigger than the challenge, stronger than the opposition, greater than what's coming against me. When you dare to believe in the middle of the storm, when you keep your faith alive, even when logic says it's over, you are setting yourself up for something extraordinary. You may not see anything changing yet, but in the unseen realm, things are shifting, doors are opening, healing is coming, breakthrough is on the way. Don't talk yourself out of your miracle because it doesn't make sense. God specializes in doing things that defy human understanding. He parts Red Seas. He brings water from a rock. He feeds thousands with a little boy's lunch. He raises the dead. What looks impossible to you is easy for him. Keep believing when it doesn't make sense. Keep praising when you could be complaining. Keep thanking him for the victory. Even when all you see is defeat, you are closer than you think. The odds may be stacked against you, but remember this, with God, you and him are a majority. Believe when it doesn't make sense, because that's when miracles happen. When we face obstacles, it's easy to get discouraged, to think something is wrong, to assume we're off course. But what if I told you that obstacle is not there to stop you, it's there to promote you? What if I told you that hidden inside that difficulty is the opportunity you've been praying for? Too often, we see obstacles as dead ends. We think, I'll never get past this. It's too big. It's too unfair. But the truth is, the obstacle was never meant to defeat you. It was meant to develop you. It was meant to bring out strengths you didn't know you had. It was meant to position you for something greater than you could have imagined. Sometimes the opportunity you've been asking for doesn't come packaged the way you expected. You prayed for growth and God sent you a challenge. You prayed for promotion and he allowed you to be overlooked. You asked for strength and he gave you a situation where you had to stand on your own. It didn't look like a blessing at first. It looked like a burden. It didn't look like favor. It looked like frustration. But underneath the surface, God was setting you up. Joseph in the Bible had a dream that he would be in a position of leadership. But before he ever sat in the palace, he was thrown into a pit by his brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and put into prison. On the surface, it looked like his life was going backward. It looked like the obstacles were destroying the dream. But each obstacle was a stepping stone. Each difficulty was a necessary piece of the puzzle. If Joseph hadn't been sold, he would never have been in Egypt. If he hadn't been falsely accused, he would never have met Pharaoh's officials. If he hadn't been in prison, he would never have had the chance to interpret Pharaoh's dream and be promoted to second in command of Egypt. What looked like a setback was actually a setup. The same is true for you. The obstacle you're facing right now may look like a delay, but it's actually delivering you to your destiny. It may seem unfair, but it's making you stronger, wiser, more resilient. It's preparing you for the level you've been asking for. Don't be surprised when opportunity comes disguised as opposition. That's how God works. He tests our faithfulness. He tests our endurance. He sees if we're willing to trust him when it doesn't look good, when it doesn't feel fair, when we're tempted to quit. If everything were easy, we wouldn't grow. If we never faced any giants, we would never discover how strong our God is. If we never had any mountains, we would never know what it feels like to see them move. The obstacle is not the end of your story. It's a doorway to a new beginning. When David faced Goliath, it seemed impossible. Everyone else ran from the giant. David ran toward him. Why? Because David understood something we often forget. The size of the obstacle is a clue to the size of the opportunity. Bigger giants mean bigger victories. Tougher battles mean greater rewards. You may be facing a giant today in your finances, your health, your relationships. It looks overwhelming. It looks like there's no way out. But don't run away. Run toward it. knowing that God has equipped you for it, knowing that there's a victory on the other side that you can't even imagine right now. God uses obstacles to bring promotion. He uses closed doors to redirect us to better ones. He uses disappointments to lead us to divine appointments. He uses what the enemy meant for harm to turn it for your good. The next time you face an obstacle, instead of getting discouraged, instead of thinking, why me? Have a new perspective. Say, this is not here to defeat me, it's here to elevate me. It's not the end of my dream, it's the beginning of something greater. Keep the right attitude. Stay in faith. Keep honoring God, doing the right thing, even when it's hard. When you do, you're going to look back and say, if it hadn't been for that obstacle, I wouldn't be where I am today. If it hadn't been for that closed door, I wouldn't have stepped into something so much better. If it hadn't been for that challenge, I wouldn't have discovered the strength, the favor, the resilience that was inside me all along. Remember, your obstacles are opportunities in disguise. Embrace them, grow through them, and watch God turn them into the stepping stones for your greatest victories. When you're standing against all odds, when the mountain is high, the road is rough, and the voices around you are filled with doubt, you have a decision to make. You can choose fear or you can choose faith. Fear will tell you, it's too hard. You'll never make it. The odds are stacked against you. But faith rises up and says, with God, all things are possible. If He brought me to it, He'll bring me through it. I am more than a conqueror. Fear and faith have something in common. They both ask you to believe in something you cannot see. Fear asks you to believe in the worst. Fear paints pictures of failure, of defeat, of disaster. But faith paints pictures of victory, of breakthrough, of miracles. The question is, which one are you going to feed? It's easy to let fear have a voice. It's easy to let worry sit at the table and start running through all the what ifs. What if I don't get the job? What if the report isn't good? What if they walk away? What if I failed? Fear will always exaggerate the problem and minimize your ability to overcome it. But faith sees the same situation through a different lens. Faith says, even though it looks impossible, I know a God who can make a way. Faith says, even though I don't have the resources, I know the source. Faith says, even though I feel weak, His strength is made perfect in my weakness. All through the scriptures, we see men and women who had every reason to give in to fear, but they chose faith. When Moses stood at the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in, fear was pounding at the door, but Moses lifted his staff in faith and the waters parted. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, fear could have overwhelmed him, but Daniel chose faith, and God shut the mouths of the lion. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were facing the fiery furnace, fear was right there trying to talk them out of standing firm, but they chose faith, and the flames couldn't touch them. It's not that fear wasn't present. It's that they didn't let fear control their actions. And you and I will have the same choice. When you're facing a health challenge, when the medical report doesn't look good, fear will whisper, it's over. But faith will rise up and declare, I will live and not die, and declare the works of the Lord. When your business is struggling, when you're behind on bills, fear will tell you you'll never recover. But faith says, my God shall supply all my needs according to His riches and glory. When you've been waiting a long time for the promise to come to pass, fear will try to convince you it's too late. It's not going to happen. But faith reminds you, though the vision tarries, wait for it. It will surely come. Faith doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means you don't let fear drive the car. It means you let faith take the wheel, knowing that even when you can't see how, God is still in control. Sometimes stepping out in faith looks foolish to the world. Noah built an ark when it had never rained. Abraham left his homeland without knowing where he was going. Peter stepped out of the boat in the middle of the storm. But those acts of faith were the very things that unlocked God's miracles. And the same is true today. God honors faith. He moves in response to faith. He rewards those who dare to believe even when the odds are against them. Don't let fear talk you out of your dream. Don't let fear paralyze you from taking the next step. Don't let fear cause you to settle for less than what God has promised. You were created to live by faith. You were designed to trust, to believe, to hope against hope, to stand when others are sitting down, to speak victory when others are declaring defeat. The battle you're facing may be big, but your faith is bigger. The odds may seem impossible, but your faith connects you to the God who makes all things possible. Today, choose faith over fear. Choose hope over doubt. Too often we find ourselves looking for big breakthroughs and miraculous moments. We want the floodgates to open, the sudden shift that changes everything overnight. While God is certainly capable of performing such miracles, more often than not, He asks us to take small, faithful steps. Those steps may seem insignificant at the time, but they are the ones that build momentum and lead to the bigger victories. We live in a world that craves instant results, that wants the easy fix, the quick solution. But in God's economy, He often works in the small, in the quiet. He's less concerned with immediate results and more focused on developing the character, the perseverance, and the faith that we need for the journey ahead. Think about the way Jesus performed many of His miracles. He didn't always do things in the grand way we might expect. When He turned water into wine, He asked the servants to fill the jars with water, a small, simple act that led to an extraordinary result. When He healed the blind man, He made mud with His saliva and placed it on the man's eyes, asking him to wash in the pool. The blind man could have thought, how could this simple act possibly help me? But because he obeyed, he was healed. In the same way, God often asks us to take small steps of obedience, even when we don't see the full picture. These small steps might not seem like they'll lead to anything major. They might feel insignificant or even pointless, but when we take them in faith, they open the door for God to do something extraordinary. This doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out. It doesn't mean you need to understand how every little step will fit into the grand picture. The key is to be faithful with what you have in front of you, even if it's just a small opportunity or a seemingly insignificant task. You might feel that what you're doing right now isn't making any noticeable difference. Maybe you're working hard at your job, but the promotion seems distant. Maybe you've been praying for years for a breakthrough, but nothing has changed yet. It's easy to get discouraged and start questioning whether it's worth it. But remember, small steps of faith lead to big victories. The key is to be faithful with where you are, even when the results aren't immediate. God sees the effort, the heart behind your obedience. When you take those small steps of faith, you are planting seeds. You might not see the harvest right away, but trust that God is working behind the scenes to bring about the increase at the right time. One of the most inspiring examples of this is the story of the Israelites crossing the Jordan River. They had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and now they were finally standing at the edge of the promised land. God instructed Joshua to have the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant into the river. But here's the catch. The river was at flood stage. The Israelites must have looked at the rushing waters and thought, how in the world is this going to work? But God told them to step into the water. And as soon as the priest's feet touched the river, the waters parted and the entire nation was able to cross on dry ground. The miracle didn't happen until the priest stepped into the water. It was only when they took that small step of faith, despite the obstacles in front of them, that God parted the river. Had they waited for the waters to part first, they would have missed the miracle. But their small act of obedience paved the way for a victory that would define their future. Your faith may feel small right now, like a step in the dark. But trust that God is guiding your every move. When you continue to step forward in faith, even when the path seems unclear, you are making progress. It's through those small steps that God builds your strength, sharpens your focus, and prepares you for the bigger victories ahead. Don't be discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Remember that the process is just as important as the destination. Every small step, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is part of the journey that is leading you toward your breakthrough. Each step of faith you take is drawing you closer to the destiny God has for you. You may have big dreams, and that's wonderful. But in order to reach them, you must be faithful in the small, everyday moments. Trust that as you continue to take those small steps, you're moving closer to your breakthrough. Don't underestimate the power of small, consistent actions. It's often the small acts of faith that lead to the big victories. And remember, God doesn't need your plans to be perfect. He doesn't need you to see the whole picture from start to finish. What He needs is for you to take the next step, to keep moving forward, trusting that He will guide you every step of the way. Small steps of faith lead to big victories. Keep going, keep believing, and know that every step you take in faith is bringing you closer to the incredible future God has prepared for you. In life, we often find ourselves looking at situations through the lens of what we can see and understand in the natural. We assess challenges, opportunities, and even our own potential based on what we can observe with our eyes. But what we see isn't always the full story. Just because something looks impossible doesn't mean it is. Just because it seems like a dead end doesn't mean God doesn't have a plan to make a way. And what we see is not always what we get, especially when it comes to God's work in our lives. We tend to rely heavily on our senses, our sight, our hearing, our understanding to interpret what's happening around us. But faith by nature requires us to step beyond what we can see. It calls us to believe that God is working in ways that we cannot perceive. When you look at a challenge, a setback, or a delay, you might only see the difficulty, but God sees the opportunity. When you're staring at what looks like a problem, God is already positioning you for a solution you can't yet imagine. Take the story of the prophet Elisha and his servant. They were surrounded by the army of Aram, and the servant was terrified, seeing only the enemy and the overwhelming odds. But Elisha prayed for his servant's eyes to be open. Suddenly, the servant saw a whole host of angels surrounding them, more powerful than the enemy's army. What the servant had seen with his natural eyes wasn't the full picture. The reality was that God's protection was already in place, even when he couldn't see it. You may be in a situation today where it feels like everything is stacked against you. You might look around and see nothing but obstacles. But just because you can't see the solution doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you can't see how it's going to work out doesn't mean that God isn't already working behind the scenes to make it happen. In the book of 2 Corinthians 4:18, it says, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." The circumstances we face in life are temporary. They may seem overwhelming right now, but they're not permanent. The victory that God is bringing into your life is eternal, and it's not always visible to the human eye. And God called Abraham to leave his home and go to a land that he would show him. Abraham didn't know where he was going. All he had was a promise from God. But what he couldn't see at the time was that God was building a legacy for him, one that would span generations. He couldn't see the great nation that would come from him. But God knew exactly what he was doing. Abraham had to step out in faith, trusting that what he saw in the natural wasn't the full picture. Sometimes the very thing you're looking at, the thing that seems like a failure, is actually the seed for your future success. A setback is not the end of the road. It's a detour that God is using to bring you to a better place. Maybe you're in a situation right now where everything looks wrong. Maybe you've been facing disappointment after disappointment. But hear me today. What you see isn't what you get. In the same way that a seed looks small and insignificant in the ground, your current situation might look small or even bleak. But God is using it to produce something much greater. Seeds need to be planted in the dark, in the hidden places, before they can burst forth into something beautiful. Your current season of waiting, of hardship, is simply the soil in which God is growing your future. It's important to remember that God's plans for you are not limited by what you can see right now. His thoughts are higher than ours, and His ways are beyond our understanding. When we look at a situation and see only problems, God is looking at it and seeing the potential for growth, for change, for transformation. Sometimes what you see is just the beginning of what God is going to do. He's always working on your behalf, even when you don't see the results immediately. You may not understand how, but you can trust that God's plan is in motion. He is weaving together the circumstances of your life, and what looks like a setback is actually part of a greater comeback. In your life, you may face seasons where things don't make sense. You may look at your job, your relationships, your finances, and think, this isn't how it's supposed to be. But let me encourage you today. What you see is not the end. God is still in control, and He's working things out in ways you can't even begin to understand. The victory you're waiting for may not be visible yet, but it's coming. The breakthrough you've been praying for is in the works, even if you can't see it yet. When you don't understand what's happening, trust that God sees what you cannot. He sees the bigger picture. He sees the potential. He sees the opportunity that lies just beyond the horizon. Don't let your current circumstances dictate your future. Instead, let your faith in God's eternal plan fuel your trust in His timing and His purpose. What you see today is just a glimpse of the bigger picture that God is unfolding in your life. Trust Him, knowing that He is working all things together for your good. It's easy to look at where you are right now and feel like your current circumstances are the final say on who you are or what you're capable of. Maybe you're in a tough season, facing challenges that feel overwhelming. And it's easy to think, this is it. This is my life now. This is as good as it's going to get. But I want to remind you today that your present does not define your future. The place you are right now is just a chapter in your story, not the entire book. The Apostle Paul knew this truth deeply. He wrote in Philippians 3:13 and 14, "Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." Paul understood that no matter what he had gone through, whether successes or failures, he was not defined by his present condition. His future was determined by what God had promised him and the steps of faith he took to move toward it. If you're in a difficult place today, don't think for a moment that it's your final destination. You might feel stuck, like there's no way out, but trust me, your current situation is not your destiny. It may be your reality for a moment, but it does not have the power to define your future. Just because things look difficult now doesn't mean they will stay that way forever. Think about Joseph again. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. By all accounts, his present looked bleak, yet his present was not his future. It wasn't long before God promoted him from the prison to the palace, from the pit to a place of influence. His story shows us that no matter how difficult or unfair our current circumstances may be, they do not define where we're going. God has a plan for us that transcends what we're experiencing today. When we allow ourselves to be defined by our present circumstances, we limit ourselves. We start to think this is all I'll ever be. But God sees beyond the surface. He sees the heart, the potential, and the purpose He's placed inside of you. He knows that this moment, no matter how difficult, is simply part of the process to bring you to where He's taking you. I know it can be hard to see beyond the present struggle. Sometimes it feels like it's going to last forever. The financial strain, the relational struggles, the health challenges. It's easy to get caught up in the weight of it all and feel like there's no way out. But don't let that moment steal your hope. Don't let it convince you that your future will always be like your present. Look at the life of David. Before he was king, he was a shepherd in a field overlooked by his family. He was anointed to be king, but it didn't happen overnight. David spent years running from King Saul, hiding in caves and facing countless obstacles. But none of that changed the fact that he was called to be king. His present did not define his future. God's purpose for his life was bigger than his circumstances. You may be feeling stuck in a difficult season right now, but I want you to remember this. Your present situation does not have the final word on who you are or what you can achieve. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." No matter what you're going through, God has a future for you, and His plans are far greater than anything you could imagine. The future God has for you is not dictated by where you are now. The person you are becoming is not limited by your current circumstances. Even if it feels like your dreams are far off, or that things are moving slower than you'd like, know that God is working behind the scenes. He is preparing you, molding you, and setting the stage for the future He has planned. There are times in life when we may feel discouraged by the gap between where we are and where we want to be. But don't get discouraged. Trust that God is at work, even when you can't see it. He is moving in your life, and He is bringing you to the place He has prepared for you. What you're going through right now is shaping you for what's ahead. Your present situation is simply a stepping stone. It's not your destination. It's a part of the journey, a necessary phase that's preparing you for greater things. And in the midst of it all, God is with you. He has not forgotten you. He is guiding you even when the road seems uncertain. If you feel like you're not where you thought you'd be, don't be discouraged. If you feel like the progress is slow, don't lose heart. Your present does not define your future. The best is yet to come, and God's plan for you is unfolding right before your eyes. Remember, where you are now is not where you'll stay. Your future is greater than your present, and with God's guidance, you're moving closer every day to the fulfillment of your destiny. Gratitude is one of the most powerful forces we can embrace in our lives, no matter what we're going through. It has the power to shift our focus, to change our attitude, and to open doors to new possibilities. We often think of gratitude as something we practice only when things are going well, when everything is aligned and flowing smoothly. But the true power of gratitude is not in what we do when life is easy. It's in how we respond when life is hard. When we find ourselves in difficult seasons, it can be easy to lose sight of the things we have to be grateful for. We tend to focus on what's missing, what's not going right, or what seems out of our control. It's natural to feel discouraged when things aren't going the way we expected. But here's the key: gratitude, even in the middle of our struggles, has the power to change everything. The Bible is full of examples of individuals who chose to give thanks, even in the most challenging circumstances. One powerful example is the story of Paul and Silas. They were imprisoned for preaching the gospel, beaten and locked in chains, in the darkest, most painful place imaginable. Yet, instead of complaining or allowing their situation to define them, they chose to praise God. Acts 16:25 tells us, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. They weren't focusing on their chains or their discomfort. They were focused on God's goodness, and that attitude of gratitude changed everything. Suddenly there was an earthquake that shook the prison doors open, and they were set free. This story teaches us an important lesson. In our most difficult moments, our response matters. When we choose gratitude, when we choose to praise, we invite God's presence into our situation. We acknowledge that even when things aren't perfect, we trust that God is still good, still faithful, and still in control. Our gratitude becomes a powerful tool that opens the door to miracles, breakthroughs, and peace. Gratitude has the ability to shift our perspective. When we focus on the things we are grateful for, it changes how we view our circumstances. Instead of being overwhelmed by everything that's wrong, we begin to see everything that's right. We realize that even in the midst of hardship, there is so much to thank God for. It may be something small, a kind word from a friend, a beautiful sunrise, or simply the breath in our lungs. But these moments of gratitude can bring peace to our hearts and clarity to our mind. Another powerful example is the story of Job. He experienced unimaginable loss, his health, his wealth, and his family. In the middle of his suffering, his friends came to him, and instead of offering comfort, they tried to explain away his pain and place blame. But through it all, Job chose to trust God. He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Job 1:21. Job didn't understand why he was going through this, but he knew that even in his darkest hour, God was worthy of his praise. His gratitude, even in the midst of his loss, was a powerful declaration of faith. It's easy to be thankful when everything is going according to plan, but it takes a different level of strength to be thankful when things aren't working out the way we thought they would. But when we can cultivate that kind of gratitude, even in the midst of trials, we begin to experience a peace that transcends understanding. Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us, "Wasn't me anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Gratitude is a choice. It's a mindset. It's something we can decide to practice, regardless of our circumstances. And when we choose it, we invite God's presence to flood our hearts, to lift our spirits, and to renew our strength. If you're in a difficult season today, I encourage you to start looking for the blessings around you. Maybe it's not obvious at first, but take a moment to pause, reflect, and give thanks for what you do have. Start with the little things, the simple joys that may often go unnoticed. As you begin to cultivate gratitude in your heart, you'll notice a shift in your attitude. You'll begin to feel lighter, more hopeful, and more confident that God is working on your behalf. Gratitude is a powerful weapon in the battle against discouragement. When you focus on what you have instead of what you lack, you begin to see the fullness of God's provision. You begin to recognize that He has been faithful all along, even when you couldn't see it. And as you continue to express gratitude, you open the door for God to work in new and unexpected ways. Gratitude is not just for the good times. It's for every season. In every moment, there is something to thank God for. And as we practice gratitude, we allow God to transform our hearts and our circumstances. The more we choose gratitude, the more we invite God's peace, joy, and blessings into our lives. No matter where you are, no matter what you're facing, there is always something to be thankful for. Cultivate an attitude of gratitude and watch as it transforms your perspective, your heart, and your circumstances. As we conclude this journey, let me leave you with this. Against all odds, there is a greater power working for you than any obstacle you face. Life will bring challenges. It will bring setbacks, disappointments, and moments of doubt. But as we've seen today, those things do not define you. They do not determine your future. You are more than your present circumstances. You are more than the difficulties you face right now. Every season, no matter how difficult, has the potential to shape you for something greater. It is through the struggles that we find our strength, through the waiting that we learn patience, and through the pressure that we discover our purpose. You might not always see it in the moment, but God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail of your life with love and intention. What you see today is not what you'll get tomorrow. The future He has for you is filled with hope, with possibilities, and with breakthroughs that you can't even imagine right now. Don't let the challenges of today cause you to forget the greatness of what lies ahead. Remember, your present is not your permanent. Your journey is still unfolding. There is more in store for you than you could ever have dreamed. Keep pressing forward. Keep trusting and keep believing that against all odds, you are destined for greatness. As you go from this moment, carry with you the understanding that every obstacle is an opportunity. Every setback, a setup for a greater comeback. Your story is not finished, and with faith, persistence, and the power of gratitude, you will see the impossible become possible. Keep going, keep believing, and know that God is with you, working in every season to bring about His perfect plan for your life. Against all odds, you will rise.